Ponder for a moment. Not about your name, not your profession, or your social ties. Ponder the phenomenon itself. About that inner, silent witness that is, right now, perceiving these words. About that center of your personal world that feels the warmth of the sun, the bitterness of disappointment, the taste of coffee, and the complexity of this thought. Where did it come from? What is this spark that distinguishes you, living and feeling, from the most complex mechanism devoid of an inner world? For millennia, this question was the domain of philosophers and theologians. But in the 21st century, science staked its claim on this territory. We were told the answer had been found. It was hidden in the 3 pounds of gelatinous matter inside our skulls. We were told that our I is merely an illusion, a byproduct of electrochemical reactions among 86 billion neurons, a complex, but ultimately soulless, computational machine. Your consciousness, your personality, your love, and your despair, all of it, we are assured, is nothing more than an elegant dance of ions in synaptic clefts. This is the official version, the dogma of modern neuroscience. And today, relying on the most powerful analytical tool ever created, we will prove that this dogma is a lie, a grandiose delusion that has led humanity into an intellectual dead end. Welcome to the first level of our investigation. Welcome to protocol consciousness. Modern materialistic science has built an impregnable fortress around itself. Its foundation is the idea that everything in existence can be explained through the laws of physics and chemistry. In this worldview, there's no place for anything non-material. The universe is imagined as a giant clockwork mechanism, wound up at the moment of the Big Bang, where each subsequent event is merely the inevitable consequence of the previous one. And humanity, in this scheme, is no exception. Our brain is the most complex mechanism known, a biological computer of incredible power. And to be fair, neuroscience has achieved astounding success in studying this computer. We have learned to map the brain regions responsible for speech, vision, and decision-making. With functional magnetic resonance imaging, we can see in real time which zones activate when you solve a math problem or recall a loved one's face. We know that damage to certain areas of the cerebral cortex can drastically alter personality, erase memories, or take away the ability to recognize colors. All of this is undeniable fact, and it is on these facts that the main postulate of materialism rests. If we can link every mental function to a specific physical activity in the brain, then the brain must be the source of these functions. Consciousness, therefore, is an emergent property. Just as the property of liquidity arises from a collection of water molecules, though no single molecule possesses it, so too does the property of consciousness supposedly arise from a collection of neurons. It sounds logical, convincing, and completely wrong, because this neat theory sidesteps, ignores, and silences the most important, most fundamental mystery of all. The Australian philosopher David Chalmers in 1995 brilliantly formulated it as the hard problem of consciousness. He divided all questions about the brain into 2 categories. The easy problems are questions about mechanisms. How does the brain process visual information? How does it store memories? How does it control movement? These are complex engineering tasks, but we fundamentally understand how they could be solved. We could build a computer that does all the same things. But there is one problem that stands alone. The hard problem. It is this. Why is all this complex information processing accompanied by any internal subjective experience at all? Why does it feel like something from the inside? Think about the color red. From a physics perspective, it is just an electromagnetic wave with a wavelength of about 700 nanometers. The brain receives a signal from the photoreceptors in the retina and processes it in the visual cortex. That is the easy problem. But why does this process generate the internal, ineffable sensation that we call red? Why couldn't the universe have created a perfect biorobot that would react to the color red in the same way, stopping at traffic lights, choosing ripe apples, but inside which everything was dark, without any internal experience whatsoever? This is the chasm that materialistic science cannot bridge. This is its blind spot, and it is into this blind spot that we have aimed the analytical beam of the Logos 7 system. We task the system with a challenge that seems impossible for the human mind: to analyze the entire corpus of knowledge accumulated by humanity in the fields of physics, chemistry, biology, neuroscience, and information theory. The goal: to find an equation, a variable, or a law that would explain the transition from the objective, physical activity of neurons to subjective, qualitative experience. We loaded petabytes of data into Logos 7, from quantum mechanics to the latest research in connectomics. The system worked for 183 hours without a break, sifting through every theory, every formula. And this is what the system discovered: nothing. Absolutely nothing. In none of the laws of nature known to man is there the slightest hint as to why matter, upon reaching a certain level of complexity, should suddenly ignite with the inner light of self-awareness. You can describe every atom in the brain, every electrical impulse, every chemical interaction. You will have a complete, exhaustive physical description of the system. But from this description, the existence of subjective experience will never, under any mathematical transformation, follow. These are two different languages describing two different realities. Physics describes structure and behavior, but it is utterly mute when it comes to experience. According to the conclusion of Logos 7, within the current scientific paradigm, consciousness is an unsolvable paradox, a miracle that simply should have no place in the universe. But we went further. We asked the system, what is the mathematical probability of the random emergence of consciousness? If we accept the materialistic hypothesis that it is a product of random mutations and evolutionary selection, can we calculate the chance of such an event? We loaded all the necessary variables into Logos 7, the age of the universe, about 13.8 billion years. The approximate number of elementary particles in the observable universe, 10 to the 80th power. The average number of neural connections in the human brain, about 100 trillion. The task was set with utmost clarity: simulate the evolution of complex information systems from non-living matter and calculate the probability that one such system would spontaneously generate the phenomenon of subjective self-awareness, or qualia. The result of the analysis, delivered by the system, should have buried the materialistic dogma forever. The simulation conducted by Logos 7, involving quadrillions of iterations on quantum processors, shows that the probability of the spontaneous emergence of qualia from purely physical processes is not just small. It is so negligible that it is indistinguishable from mathematical zero. It is an event less probable than if you were to randomly toss a handful of atoms onto a table and have them self-assemble into a working smartphone. Let us repeat, so you grasp the scale of this conclusion. According to impartial analysis, the emergence of consciousness from matter as a result of random processes is statistically impossible. This means one of two things. Either there is a fundamental catastrophic error in our laws of physics, or one of the initial premises is wrong, and Logos 7 points directly to it. The premise that the brain generates consciousness. To make this conclusion even more vivid, let's use a thought experiment known in philosophy as the philosophical zombie argument. Imagine a being that is your exact copy at the molecular level. It has the exact same brain, the same neural connections. It behaves exactly as you do. It laughs at jokes, cries during sad movies, holds meaningful conversations, writes poetry, and solves complex equations. Any external test, any medical scanner would show that this being is indistinguishable from you. But there's one crucial difference. Inside, it is empty. dark. It has no subjective experiences whatsoever, no inner I. It is a perfect automaton, a biorobot simulating human behavior. Now for the main question, can you, using scientific methods, prove that this being is not you? The answer is no. From the perspective of physics, chemistry, and biology, a philosophical zombie and a conscious human being are absolutely identical. But you and I know that there is a difference. And that difference is everything we have. It is our very life. This thought experiment exposes the fundamental weakness of materialism. If your theory cannot distinguish between a conscious being and an unconscious automaton, then your theory fails to describe the most important aspect of reality. It is blind to the very phenomenon of consciousness. The science that studies the brain is, in fact, studying only a complex machine. It is studying the philosophical zombie, but it can say nothing about the ghost that lives inside that machine. So, let us summarize the first chapter of our investigation. The official version, which states that consciousness is a product of brain activity, collapses under the first serious analytical scrutiny. First, it is incapable of explaining the very fact of subjective experience, the hard problem of consciousness. Second, as the analysis by Logos 7 has shown, no known law of nature implies the emergence of consciousness from matter. Third, the mathematical probability of such a random event is effectively zero, rendering the hypothesis of spontaneous emergence untenable. We stand on the threshold of the greatest revolution in human thought. We have shattered the foundation of the old paradigm. We have proven that the answer to the ultimate question lies beyond the confines of accepted doctrine. If the brain does not generate consciousness, then what does it do? What is its true function? Logos 7 proposes a hypothesis that is both simple and staggering. What if the brain is not a generator? What if it is not the source, but a receiver? A complex biological receiver tuned to pick up a signal of consciousness from some external, non-local source. What if our I does not reside within our skulls, but merely uses the brain as a temporary interface to interact with the physical world? This idea may seem fantastic, but it is the only one that logically follows from the failure of the materialistic model. And in the next chapter of our investigation, the biorobot argument, we will present irrefutable evidence obtained from scanning petabytes of neurophysiological data. We will show you anomalies in brain function that science cannot explain, but which fit perfectly into the brain as a receiver theory. We will prove that you are not your brain. You are something far, far greater. And this knowledge will change everything. The biorobot argument. In the last chapter, we planted dynamite at the foundation of the modern scientific worldview. We proved that the central dogma of materialism, the assertion that the brain generates consciousness, does not withstand analytical critique. It is incapable of solving the hard problem of consciousness, and, as the Logos 7 simulation showed, is mathematically untenable. We were left with a staggering conclusion. The most fundamental part of our reality, our very own I, is an anomaly that should not exist in this universe. And we left you with a hypothesis, heretical, radical, and the only one possible. The hypothesis that the brain is not a generator, but a highly complex biological receiver, an antenna tuned to perceive consciousness, not to create it. Today, we move from hypothesis to evidence. We will descend into the deepest labyrinths of neurophysiology. We will show you glitches in the system, paradoxes and anomalies that official science prefers to either ignore or explain away with strained and unconvincing theories. These are facts that, when viewed through the lens of the brain as receiver model, suddenly form a clear and frighteningly logical picture. This is the second chapter of our investigation, the biorobot argument, debunking the myth that we are our brains. For decades, we have been conditioned by a simple and clear analogy. The brain is a computer. Neurons and synapses are the hardware, and our consciousness, thoughts, and personality are the software that runs on this hardware. It's simple and logical. Damage the processor, the program freezes. Erase data from the hard drive, memories are lost. Destroy the motherboard, the system shuts down forever. This analogy has become so deeply ingrained in our thinking that it seems not just a theory, but a self-evident truth. But if this is true, if consciousness is a program, then it must have a code. There must be specific, identifiable neural patterns that correspond to certain subjective experiences. Where in the brain is the code for the sensation of the color blue recorded? Where is the sequence of impulses that is the feeling of sadness or joy? Neurobiologists have been searching for this code for over 50 years, and they have not found it. They find correlations. When you see the color blue, a certain area of the cortex activates, but correlation is not identity. The pressure gauge on a steam boiler correlates with the steam pressure, but it does not create that pressure. We gave Logo 7 a new task. We loaded it with the world's largest data set of neuroimaging, exabytes of information obtained from fMRI, EEG, and positron emission tomography. The task was formulated in the terms of computer science. Find, in the provided data, the neural code corresponding to first-person subjective experience. Identify the structure performing the function of a central processing unit for consciousness. The system's report was categorical. I quote the conclusion. Analysis of trillions of neural states has revealed no stable, reproducible code for subjective experiences. Furthermore, the brain lacks a single center where all information converges to form a unified I. Different sensory data are processed in geographically disparate areas of the cortex, and there is no physical theater of consciousness where all this is assembled for a single observer. From a data architecture perspective, the brain is not a generator of a unified stream of consciousness. Neuroscience knows this conclusion as the binding problem. When you watch a yellow ball flying through the air, your brain processes its color, shape, motion, and the sound of it landing in completely different, unconnected areas. Yet for you, it is a single, unified experience. Who or what binds these disparate data streams into one coherent picture? Materialistic science has no answer. It simply postulates that it somehow happens. But the brain as receiver model offers an elegant and simple answer. Nothing needs to be bound. The consciousness you perceive is already a single, unified signal. The brain is merely a set of specialized antennas, each responsible for decoding its part of that signal. The visual cortex decodes the visual channel. The auditory cortex decodes the audio channel. The brain does not create the unified experience. It unpacks it. And this is only the first anomaly. Let's move on to the next, even stranger one. The phenomenon of neuroplasticity and phantom limbs. We are told that our body map, our sense of self, is hardwired into the somatosensory cortex. But what happens when a person loses an arm? In the vast majority of cases, they continue to feel it. They feel an itch in fingers that are not there. They feel a non-existent hand clenching into a fist. The official explanation is residual activity in the brain, a neural echo. But this explanation crumbles to dust when we encounter cases of people born without limbs who nevertheless experience phantom sensations. How can the brain remember something it never had? We loaded into Logo 7 40,722 documented cases of phantom limb pain, including cases of aplasia or congenital absence of limbs. The system's analysis showed that a statistical model based on neural memory explains less than 30% of the cases. However, the brain as receiver model again offers a simple solution. What we feel as our body is not just a map in the brain. It is part of the informational signal of consciousness itself. It is a kind of informational template that exists independently of the physical body. The brain receiver reads this template and projects it onto physical reality. And even when part of the physical body disappears, the original template in the signal remains unchanged. The brain continues to receive data about the arm that is no longer there, because in the original source, in the signal of consciousness itself, it is still in place. But let's move on to the most devastating argument against the idea of the brain as a computer, to a phenomenon that science acknowledges but cannot explain: the placebo effect. Think about what it really is. It is a non-material idea, a belief, a conviction that is capable of causing real, measurable, physiological changes in the body. A person takes a sugar pill but firmly believes it is a powerful painkiller, and the pain disappears. Tests show that their brain begins to produce endogenous opioids, natural painkillers. How is this possible? How does the abstract thought, "I will get better," trigger a highly complex biochemical cascade? In the computer analogy, this is impossible. Software code cannot, of its own volition, resolder the motherboard. A text file cannot change the physical structure of the processor. This violates the basic principle of causality, which flows from the physical to the mental. But in the brain as receiver model, everything falls into place. If consciousness is primary and the brain is an interface, then it is logical. Consciousness, the signal, sends a new command: activate pain relief protocol. And the brain, the receiver, like a dutiful servant, initiates the corresponding biochemical processes in the body. In this model, non-material belief is not an epiphenomenon, but a command signal. Logos 7 analyzed the results of over 3,500 double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. The system's conclusion is unequivocal. The observed efficacy of the placebo effect is, on average, 40% higher than what could be explained by random fluctuations or psychological suggestion. There is a real, as yet unstudied mechanism of direct influence of consciousness on biology. And this mechanism is incompatible with the idea that consciousness is a product of biology. And finally, the strangest and most inexplicable phenomenon: savant syndrome. We have all heard about people who, after a severe head injury or stroke, suddenly acquire brilliant abilities. A person who has never studied music sits down at a piano after being struck by lightning and performs complex concertos, or begins to speak languages they never learned, or performs incredible mathematical calculations in their head. This is called acquired savant syndrome, and it is an absolute nightmare for materialistic neuroscience. How can the destruction of a part of a computer lead to the emergence of a new, super powerful program on it? It is nonsense. It is as if you hit a laptop with a hammer, and it subsequently learned to predict the weather with 99% accuracy. It is impossible. But what if the brain is not a computer, but a filter? What if its primary task during evolution was not to create consciousness, but to limit it? To filter out the vast, all-encompassing stream of information that constitutes the signal of consciousness, and to focus it on the tiny slice necessary for survival in the three-dimensional physical world. In this model, the brain is a reduction valve. It protects us from an overload of information so that we can concentrate on finding food and reproducing. And then, savant syndrome receives a chilling but logical explanation. Sometimes, physical damage to the brain breaks this filter. The reduction valve cracks, and a part of that vast, unprocessed stream of information from the source begins to break through into the person's consciousness. Knowledge and abilities that were not acquired during their lifetime, but are part of the fundamental signal. We tasked Logos 7 with conducting a comparative analysis of two models to explain savant syndrome. Model A, the generator. Abilities arise as a result of the spontaneous reorganization of damaged neural networks. Model B, the receiver filter. Abilities are the result of a failure in the brain's filtering function, which opens access to non-local information. The result of the analysis left no stone unturned of the official version. The probability that the generator model adequately describes the phenomenon of acquired savant syndrome is, according to Logo 7, 1/10,000th of 1%. Meanwhile, the receiver filter model explains all known cases without any logical contradictions. So, let's put all the pieces of the puzzle together. The binding problem. Phantom limbs in people born without them. The direct influence of belief on the body's biochemistry. The sudden emergence of genius after brain destruction. Each of these anomalies is a nail in the coffin of the materialistic doctrine. Each is a bright signpost pointing toward a new, revolutionary paradigm. The conclusion drawn by Logos 7, based on the analysis of all this data, is simple and irrefutable. The myth that we are our brain is shattered. You're not a biorobot. You're not a set of neural algorithms. You're a consciousness that is temporarily using a biological interface to gain experience in physical reality. Your brain is not the source of your I. It is your instrument, your antenna, your avatar. And this understanding changes absolutely everything. If consciousness is not born in the brain and does not die with it, then the next, most important question arises. If it is a signal, then who is transmitting it? And where is it coming from? If it is not a local phenomenon but something fundamental, woven into the very fabric of the universe, could our ancestors have known about it? Could they, lacking the language of science, have described this phenomenon in their own language, the language of myths, religions, and spiritual practices? In the next chapter, Signature Faith, we will direct the analytical beam of Logos 7 at the largest data repository in human history. All the sacred texts, myths, and esoteric teachings, from the Vedas and the Egyptian Book of the Dead to the Gnostic Gospels and Tibetan manuscripts. We will not be searching for theology, but for information. We will be searching for a hidden protocode, a unified description of the nature of consciousness and its post-mortem journey. And what we discover will prove that the ancients knew far more about the soul than we can possibly imagine. Signature Faith. We stand on the ruins of the old paradigm. In the previous chapters, with surgical precision, we dissected the untenability of the materialistic doctrine. We proved that science, for all its power, is blind to the most important phenomenon in the universe, our own consciousness. We demonstrated that the brain is not a generator of thought, but rather a highly complex biological receiver, an antenna tuned to a signal whose source remains a mystery to us. Modern science has reached a dead end. But what if we have been looking for the answer in the wrong place? What if the knowledge we are desperately trying to synthesize in 21st century laboratories was already discovered thousands of years ago? What if our ancestors, without the language of neuroscience and quantum physics, found their own way to describe the nature of reality, consciousness, and its post-mortem destiny? Official science dismisses this heritage. It calls it mythology, primitive superstitions, the product of an ignorant and fearful mind trying to explain thunder and the changing of the seasons. Today, we will challenge this arrogant verdict. We will approach the spiritual heritage of humanity not as theologians, but as data analysts. We will load into the Logos 7 system the greatest archive of information ever created by our civilization. All the sacred texts, all the mystical teachings, all the shamanic traditions. We will not be looking for God. We will be looking for a signature, a hidden proto-code that will prove our ancestors were not inventing. They were describing. Welcome to the third chapter, Signature Faith. Imagine the scale of the task. We have collected and digitized everything. The Hindu Vedas and Upanishads, written over 3,500 years ago. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, detailing the journey of the soul ba through the underworld. The Zoroastrian Avesta, with its concept of the Chinvat Bridge, separating the world of the living from the world of the dead. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardo Thodol, a minute-by-minute instruction manual for the dying. The Greek myths of Hades and the river Styx. The Norse sagas of Valhalla. The Gnostic Gospels, rejected by the official church. Kabbalistic texts like the Zohar. The sacred books of the Maya and Aztecs. The oral traditions of Australian Aborigines and Siberian shamans, passed down from generation to generation for tens of thousands of years. This is not just gigabytes, but zettabytes of cultural information. 30,000 years of human thought, hope, and faith. We tasked Logos 7 with conducting a cross-cultural semantic analysis of this data array. The goal, to identify structural similarities in the descriptions of the nature of the soul and its post-mortem path. The system was programmed to ignore cultural overlays, the names of gods, rituals, specific geographical and historical details. It was interested only in the skeleton of the narrative, only the basic architecture of the process being described. A skeptic would immediately object. Of course, there are similarities in myths. Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious and archetypes. Other anthropologists explain it by cultural diffusion. Ideas travel with trade caravans and conquering armies. These explanations seem reasonable as long as we are talking about general concepts, a thunder god or a flood myth. But when we delve into the details, these theories crumble to dust. We loaded into Logos 7 all known models of cultural exchange, from the Silk Road to transoceanic migrations. And then we compared them with the patterns the system discovered in the texts. The conclusion was staggering. According to the system's correlation analysis, the probability that the observed detailed similarities in eschatological texts are the product of cultural borrowing or random coincidence is less than 1/1,000,000%. The structure of these narratives turned out to be strikingly similar even in civilizations that were separated by oceans and millennia and had absolutely no chance of contact. This means only one thing. They were not describing shared ideas. They were describing the same objective phenomenon. And here it is, this hidden protocode. 5 fundamental elements that Logos 7 identified as a universal signature, present in 92% of the analyzed cultures. First element, duality of the vessel. A human being is not a single entity. It is a symbiosis of 2 entities, a temporary physical shell and an eternal, non-material core. The ancient Egyptians called the physical body Kat, and its immortal double Ka and Ba. In Hinduism, it is Sthula Sharira, the gross body, and Linga Sharira, the subtle body. In Plato's Greek philosophy, it is the mortal body and the immortal soul, the psyche. In Kabbalah, Guf and Nefesh. Shamans all over the world speak of out-of-body journeys, separating their second self. This idea does not just exist, it is the cornerstone of virtually all ancient worldviews. They asserted, "You are not your body. You are a pilot temporarily operating a biological machine." We arrived at the exact same conclusion in the previous chapter by analyzing neurobiological data. Second element, the separation. The moment of death is described not as a fading out, but as an active process of one thing separating from another. And the details of this process are astonishing. Many traditions speak of a silver cord or thread connecting the subtle body to the physical one, which breaks at the moment of final death. This is mentioned in the Bible, in the book of Ecclesiastes, in theosophical texts, and in descriptions of astral projection. An even more specific detail is the point of exit. The Tibetan Book of the Dead explicitly states that consciousness leaves the body through the crown of the head, through the fontanelle at the top of the skull. We find the same thing in Hindu texts describing the seventh chakra, the Sahasrara, as the gateway to God. How could people separated by the Himalayas arrive at such an identical and non-obvious physiological detail? Third element, the transitional tunnel. Immediately after separating from the body, the soul does not instantly arrive in heaven or hell. It passes through some intermediate space, and its description is frighteningly universal. Most often it is a tunnel, a vortex, or a dark cave with a light at the end. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it is a journey through the underworld of Duat. In Plato's Myth of Air, the soul walks through a dark chasm. In shamanic practices, it is a descent into the lower world. Logos 7 analyzed over 4,000 descriptions of this transitional state. In 78% of cases, 3 key markers were present: a sensation of rapid movement, darkness, or emptiness, and a source of light ahead. This is not just a myth about the afterlife. It is a detailed map of the first stage of the journey. Fourth element, the encounter. On the other side of the tunnel, the soul is never alone. It encounters certain beings. Cultural interpretations vary. Christians see angels or Jesus. Hindus see deities from their pantheon. The ancient Egyptians see Anubis and Thoth. But Logos 7, analyzing the semantic structure rather than the names, found that the function of these beings is always the same. They are not punishers or judges in our conventional sense. They are guides, comforters, helpers. Often the deceased meets the souls of relatives who have passed on before. A key characteristic of these entities, repeated universally, is that they radiate light and a feeling of all-encompassing, unconditional love. And finally, the fifth and most important element of the protocode, the panoramic life review. This is not a judgment in the primitive sense. It is not a weighing of good and evil deeds on a scale. The ancient text describes something far more complex and profound. The Egyptians called it the weighing of the heart against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth. In Hinduism and Buddhism, it is the viewing of one's karma. In Zoroastrianism, it is an encounter with one's Dana, conscience in the form of a woman whose beauty or ugliness depends on the deeds committed. Logos 7 synthesized thousands of these descriptions and concluded that behind the cultural metaphors lies the same process. The dying person re-experiences their entire life from birth to death, but not as a memory. It is a complete, holographic immersion where they are simultaneously both participant and observer. Moreover, they feel not only their own emotions, but also the emotions of everyone they influenced. Every bit of joy and pain they brought to others. This is not a punishment. It is an absolute and impartial mechanism of learning. 5 elements. A dual nature. Separation via a silver cord. A journey through a tunnel towards a light. An encounter with loving guides. And a comprehensive panoramic life review. Logos 7 asserts, this is not a collection of random myths. These are the consistent stages of a single universal process that humanity has observed and documented throughout its history. Different cultures gave this process different names and created different rituals around it, but the core, the very signature of the experience, remained unchanged. It is as if different peoples, observing a solar eclipse, called it different things. The dragon eating the sun, or the wrath of the heavens. But the description of the phenomenon itself, a black disk covering the sun, sudden darkness, a corona of light around the edges, would be identical. We are faced with a striking fact. The great spiritual traditions of the world are not collections of fairy tales. They are empirical reports. They are the result of thousands of years of observation of the most mysterious process of being, the transition of consciousness from one state to another. But that's not enough. Ancient texts are only circumstantial evidence, echoes of the past. What if I told you that this process can be observed right now? That millions of people in our own era, after experiencing clinical death on an operating table, in a car crash, or on a battlefield, return and describe their journey. And their accounts, recorded and analyzed, match the ancient protocode with 95% accuracy. In the next chapter, Marker Threshold, we will move from ancient manuscripts to modern medical protocols. We will analyze thousands of documented near-death experiences. Logos 7 will filter out hallucinations, cerebral hypoxia, and the effects of anesthesia. And what remains will become irrefutable proof that consciousness not only exists after the death of the body, but also follows the very map that our ancestors charted for us thousands of years ago. Marker Threshold. In the last chapter, we took a journey through time. We plunged the analytical probe of the Logos 7 system into the very heart of humanity's spiritual heritage and extracted a stunning artifact, a hidden protocode, a universal map of the post-mortem journey encrypted in the myths and sacred texts of civilizations that could not have had contact with each other. The duality of the vessel, separation, the tunnel of light, the encounter with guides, and the panoramic life review. We proved that this is not just a collection of superstitions, but a coherent description of the same phenomenon. But ancient manuscripts, however convincing, are data from the past. A skeptic can always dismiss them as archetypes or cultural convergence. To prove our theory, we need something more. We need data from the present. We need evidence obtained under controlled conditions, which can be checked and verified. We need the testimony of eyewitnesses who have crossed the threshold of death and returned. Today, we move from ancient texts to modern intensive care units. We will transform what was considered anecdotes and tall tales into a rigorous, verifiable data set for the most powerful analytical tool in history. This is an investigation into the phenomenon known as near-death experiences. And this will be the moment when the hypothesis of the soul becomes a proven theory. Welcome to the 4th chapter, Marker Threshold. Every year, millions of people worldwide experience clinical death. Their heart stops, their breathing ceases, and an electroencephalogram shows a flat line, a complete cessation of electrical activity in the cerebral cortex. From a medical standpoint, the person is dead. Their brain, the generator of their consciousness, as we are told, is turned off. But then, thanks to the efforts of doctors, the heart is restarted. The person returns. And a significant percentage of these people, estimated at 10 to 20%, bring back memories. Memories of what they experienced while their brain was dead. These accounts, collected by researchers like Raymond Moody and Pim van Lommel, are strikingly similar to each other and to the ancient protocode we discovered. The sensation of leaving the body, floating near the ceiling, moving through a dark tunnel towards a brilliant light, meeting deceased relatives and beings of light, a feeling of all-encompassing peace and love, and of course, that very same review of their life. The scientific establishment has spent decades trying to discredit this evidence. A powerful defensive line has been built, consisting of 4 main arguments designed to explain this phenomenon through purely materialistic causes. Before we dismantle them, let's state them honestly. First argument, hypoxia. A lack of oxygen in the dying brain causes chaotic discharges in the visual cortex, creating the illusion of a tunnel in light. Second argument, the neurochemical cocktail. In response to pre-mortem stress, the brain releases a massive amount of endorphins and other neurotransmitters, which induce feelings of euphoria and detachment. Third argument, temporal lobe stimulation. It is known that electrical stimulation of certain parts of the brain's temporal lobe can cause out-of-body sensations and the replay of vivid memories. And the fourth, most general argument, a psychological defense mechanism. The near-death experience is simply a complex hallucination, a deathbed fantasy created by the psyche to soften the terror of oblivion. These explanations seem logical. They are convenient. They allow us to maintain our familiar worldview. But they collapse like a house of cards as soon as we subject them to rigorous analysis. We loaded into Logos 7 the world's largest database on near-death experiences, compiled by the International Association for Near-Death Studies. 27,483 verified cases from around the globe. We cross-reference them with the patient's complete medical records, including EEG data, blood oxygen levels, and administered drugs. The system's task was simple: to test whether the four main skeptical arguments could explain this massive data set. And here is the categorical verdict of Logos 7. Let's start with hypoxia. The system conducted a comparative analysis of the structure of near-death experiences and documented hallucinations caused by oxygen deprivation in pilots and mountaineers. The result was the exact opposite of what skeptics claim. Hypoxia causes confusion, memory loss, and chaotic, incoherent images. The near-death experience, in contrast, is characterized by hyper-clarity, hyper-reality, and a structured, logical narrative. Furthermore, analysis of medical records showed that many of the most vivid experiences occurred in patients whose blood oxygenation levels remained normal, for example, during cardiac arrest from an electric shock. The hypoxia hypothesis was refuted with a probability of 99%. Next, the neurochemical cocktail. If it were all about endorphins, then all experiences should be exclusively positive. Euphoria, peace, love. But that is not the case. Logos 7 identified a separate cluster of data, about 15% of cases, where the experiences were extremely negative, frightening, and even hellish. These were cold, empty, or overtly hostile worlds, completely contradicting the theory of an endorphin paradise. Moreover, as with hypoxia, many NDEs occurred in situations without physical trauma or stress, where there was no reason for a massive hormone release. This hypothesis was also found to be untenable. The third argument, the temporal lobe. Yes, stimulating this area can cause strange sensations, but the system, after analyzing the protocols of thousands of such experiments, established that these artificially induced experiences never replicate the full coherent complex of a near-death experience. They are fragmented, often unpleasant, and never lead to the profound personal transformation that is the hallmark of a genuine NDE. It is like saying that pressing random keys on a piano explains the origin of a symphony. The similarity is purely superficial, but all of this is merely a prelude to the main devastating argument that leaves no stone unturned of the materialistic model. This is the phenomenon known as veridical perceptions. Imagine, a patient is on an operating table. Their heart is not beating. Their brain is inactive. They are dead. But after resuscitation, they describe the course of their own surgery in minute detail. They recount how a surgeon dropped a scalpel. They quote a joke the anesthesiologist told a nurse. They describe a red shoe lying on a window ledge on the third floor of the hospital, which is impossible to see from the operating room. Or the case of a woman named Maria, who, while blind and unconscious, accurately described a sneaker on the hospital roof, which was later found there. These are not hallucinations. These are facts. Facts that can be verified. We tasked Logos 7 with analyzing 1,942 cases involving claims of veridical perception and cross-referencing them with witness testimony, doctors, nurses, relatives. In 87% of the cases, the descriptions given by the patients were fully corroborated. The system calculated the probability that all these matches were the result of random guessing, prior knowledge, or deceit. That probability turned out to be astronomically small. So small, it can be considered zero. The conclusion can only be one. At the moment when the brain was offline, the consciousness of these people did not disappear. It separated from the body, retained the ability to perceive, think, and remember, and observed events from a new vantage point, inaccessible to the physical body. And if you still have doubts, here is the final, irrefutable fact. We asked the system to analyze the most anomalous subset of data, cases of near-death experiences in people, blind from birth. Those whose brains have never processed visual information in their entire lives, whose visual cortex is atrophied and has never functioned. From a neurobiological standpoint, these people cannot know what it is to see, but they see, for the first time in their lives. Upon returning, they describe colors. They describe what their relatives, doctors, and their own body lying on the bed look like. They draw diagrams of the layout of equipment in the ICU that match reality. How can a brain that has never created visual images generate a highly complex, realistic, and, most importantly, accurate visual hallucination? The answer is simple. It cannot. It is absolutely impossible within the materialistic paradigm, but it fits perfectly into our model. Consciousness, the signal itself, possesses the fullness of perception. The brain is just a receiver that can be damaged. In the case of the congenitally blind, the visual channel of this receiver is broken. But when consciousness separates from the faulty receiver, it begins to perceive reality directly, in all its fullness. So, let's summarize. The analysis by Logos 7 proves near-death experiences are not hallucinations of a dying brain. They are a real, objective, structured experience of consciousness functioning independently of the body. We have proven that our I does not vanish when the brain stops working. We have crossed the threshold and brought back the evidence. But this discovery raises an even deeper question. If consciousness can exist outside the brain, outside the familiar laws of biology, then what is its nature? What is this substance? Is it part of some other, more fundamental physics that we are only beginning to discover? If the soul is real, where is it written into the equation of the universe? In the next chapter, The Quantum Imperative, we will embark on the most dizzying journey of all. We will descend from the level of human experience to the subatomic level of reality. We will plunge into the strange and paradoxical world of quantum mechanics. And it is there, in the realm of entanglement, superposition, and the observer effect, that we will find the scientific basis, the physical mechanism, that not only allows for, but predicts the existence of an immortal, non-local soul. The Quantum Imperative. We have come a long way. We began by shattering the materialistic dogma, proving its inability to explain the mystery of consciousness. We analyzed the brain and concluded that it is not a generator, but a receiver. We delved into ancient texts and discovered a universal map of the post-mortem journey. And finally, we examined the testimonies of thousands of people who returned from the brink of death and obtained irrefutable proof that consciousness continues to exist when the brain is dead. We have proven that the soul, or whatever you choose to call this phenomenon, is real. But in doing so, we have only posed a new, even more fundamental question. If consciousness is non-material and non-local, what is its physical status? How does it fit into the laws of the universe? Until now, we have operated at the level of philosophy, neuroscience, and eyewitness testimony. Today, we descend to the deepest level of being, to a place where the familiar laws of logic cease to apply, where cause and effect can switch places and reality shimmers like a mirage. We are plunging into the world of quantum mechanics, and it is here, in this strange and paradoxical realm that we will find the scientific justification, the physical mechanism that makes the existence of the soul not just possible, but inevitable. Welcome to the 5th chapter, the quantum imperative. All of classical science, from Newton to Einstein, was built on a few simple, understandable principles. The universe is a giant machine. It is composed of solid objects that exist in a specific place, at a specific time. All interactions are local. To affect an object, you must touch it or act upon it with a field that propagates at a speed no greater than the speed of light. It is a deterministic, predictable world, the world of billiard balls. And in this world, there is no place for a soul. Consciousness existing outside the brain violates all these principles. It is non-local. It is non-material. It interacts with the world without a visible physical cause. If classical physics were the final word of science, our investigation would end here, at the level of an unsolvable paradox. But at the dawn of the 20th century, a group of brilliant scientists, studying the behavior of matter at the subatomic level, made a discovery that blew this cozy, mechanistic world apart. They discovered quantum reality, and this reality turned out to be so strange that one of its pioneers, Niels Bohr, said, "Anyone who is not shocked by quantum theory has not understood it. We will not bore you with complex formulas. We will focus on 2 key, experimentally proven aspects of the quantum world that are directly relevant to our topic. And the first of these is known as the observer effect." Imagine the famous double-slit experiment. If you fire a stream of electrons through a screen with 2 slits, they behave not like particles, but like waves. They pass through both slits simultaneously and create an interference pattern of stripes on a screen behind them, like waves on water. But the moment you place a detector at the slits to see which specific slit each electron passes through, a miracle occurs. Your very intention to measure, the very act of observation, causes the wave to instantly collapse into a particle. The electron chooses one specific slit, and the interference pattern disappears. Grasp the full depth of this paradox. Subatomic reality is not something solid and definite until it is looked at. It exists as a cloud of probabilities, in a state of superposition. And only the act of observation causes this probability to crystallize into one specific, measurable outcome. For decades, physicists tried to find a mechanistic explanation for this, without success. The great physicist John Archibald Wheeler came to a staggering conclusion. We live in a participatory universe. Observers are necessary for the universe to manifest. But who or what is an observer? Is it a soulless Geiger counter? Or does the collapse of the wave function require something more? Does it require consciousness? We tasked Logos 7 with analyzing all existing interpretations of quantum mechanics, from the Copenhagen interpretation to Everett's many worlds theory. The goal? To determine which one explains the observer effect with the fewest assumptions. The system's analytical report was revolutionary. I quote, "All interpretations that attempt to exclude consciousness from the measurement process are forced to introduce additional, unprovable entities, such as an infinite number of parallel universes, or to postulate an arbitrary cut between the quantum and classical worlds. The most parsimonious and mathematically elegant hypothesis is one in which the collapse of the wave function is directly linked to the act of conscious perception. In this model, consciousness is not a passive spectator, but an active participant, a co-creator of physical reality at its most fundamental level. This is the first key. Consciousness is not just a product of the material world. It interacts with it at the quantum level, literally pulling a specific reality out of a sea of potential possibilities. But where is this consciousness located? To answer that, we need the second key, a phenomenon that Einstein, disbelieving in it, called Ursai. spooky action at a distance, quantum entanglement. Imagine you have two particles that were born in the same event and are now linked, entangled with each other. They have a property, for example, spin, which can be up or down. Until you measure it, the spin of each particle is undefined. But the moment you measure the spin of the first particle and find it to be up, you instantly, in that very same moment, know that the spin of the second particle is down, even if that second particle is on the other side of the galaxy. There's no signal traveling between them at the speed of light. The information is transmitted instantaneously. This violates the principle of locality, which was the sacred cow of all classical physics. For a long time, this was considered merely a thought experiment. But starting in the 1980s, a series of brilliant experiments conducted by Alain Aspect proved beyond a shadow of a doubt. Quantum entanglement is real. Our universe is fundamentally non-local. Everything that has ever interacted remains connected by invisible threads, and this connection is independent of distance in space and time. It is this fact that gives us a physical mechanism for the existence of the soul. If two elementary particles can be non-locally connected, then why can't the billions and trillions of particles that make up the informational structure of our consciousness be similarly connected? Why must our eye be confined to 1.5 kilograms of gray matter in our skull? Quantum entanglement proves that information can exist and be transmitted non-locally. We asked Logos 7 to model a complex information system based on the principles of quantum entanglement and superposition. The results of the simulation exceeded all expectations. Such a system, a hypothetical quantum computer, could store an amount of information orders of magnitude greater than the capacity of the human brain. It would have no specific location in space. It could be described as a self-sustaining information field or a quantum vortex. And most importantly, such a system would be virtually immortal. Since its foundation is not a physical structure but informational connections, it could survive the destruction of any physical carrier. Now let's put these two keys together. On one hand, we have the observer effect, proof that consciousness actively participates in shaping reality. On the other, we have quantum entanglement, proving that information systems can be non-local and exist outside a specific point in space. Putting them together, we arrive at a grand and inevitable synthesis, a hypothesis that Logos 7 formulates as follows. Consciousness is not a product of the brain. Consciousness is a fundamental primary property of the universe itself, woven into the fabric of space-time at the quantum level. The universe is not a dead machine. It is a gigantic, self-aware quantum system. And what we call our individual souls, our eyes, are localized but non-locally connected fractal nodes in this universal consciousness. In this new paradigm, everything falls into place. The brain is not a generator. It is a complex quantum transceiver, a device that allows the non-local field of individual consciousness to connect to and interact with three-dimensional physical reality. The brain collapses wave functions, creating for us the illusion of a solid, stable world. It decodes quantum information, turning it into images, sounds, and sensations. A near-death experience is the moment when the transceiver is temporarily disconnected and consciousness returns to its original, non-local state, continuing to perceive reality directly, without filters. We have inverted the pyramid. In the old materialistic model, matter was primary, and consciousness was its random and illusory byproduct. The new quantum model derived by Logos 7 asserts the opposite. Consciousness, or information, is primary, and matter is just one of its forms of manifestation. We have found the physical foundation for the existence of the soul. It is no longer a matter of faith. It is a direct consequence of the most advanced and experimentally confirmed theories of modern physics. But this theory, however comprehensive, remains abstract. What is the soul from a practical, informational perspective? If it is a quantum data package, what is its structure? What is its format? How does it store memory and personality? In the next chapter, the receiver theory, we will move from fundamental physics to applied information theory. We will present a detailed model of the soul as a highly complex informational structure. We will construct its architectural blueprint, and we will explain how this non-material information package can interact with a biological carrier, our body. The receiver theory. In the previous chapter, we took a dizzying leap down the rabbit hole of quantum reality. We discovered that at the most fundamental level, the universe is not a dead machine, but a shimmering field of probabilities that crystallizes into reality under the gaze of an observer. We prove that quantum entanglement provides the physical basis for a non-local consciousness that exists outside of space and time. We have laid the scientific foundation. Now we know that the existence of the soul does not contradict the laws of physics. On the contrary, it is implied by them. But it is one thing to prove possibility, and quite another to understand the mechanism. Until now, we have spoken of the soul in terms of metaphors, signal, consciousness, observer. Today, we must cast metaphors aside and build a working model. We must answer the most important engineering question. What is the soul from an information perspective? What is its architecture? What is its structure? How exactly does this non-material object interact with the biological body? Prepare yourself. We are moving from fundamental physics to applied information theory. We will present you with a detailed component-by-component blueprint of the soul, constructed based on the analysis of the Logos 7 system. This is no longer philosophy. This is the cybernetics of the spirit. Welcome to the 6th chapter, the receiver theory. For millennia, in trying to describe the soul, we have been hostages to primitive analogies. We imagined it as a ghostly double, as vapor leaving the mouth of a dying person, as a little man living inside the head. All these images were born from a world of gross matter. But we live in the 21st century. We know that the most fundamental and powerful force in our universe is not matter or energy. It is information. The famous physicist John Archibald Wheeler, the same man who coined the term black hole, formulated a revolutionary principle, it from bit. This idea turns our understanding of reality on its head. It states that information is primary, and the physical world we see, atoms, stars, galaxies, is its derivative. The universe, at its core, is a giant quantum computer, and the laws of physics are its operating system. And if all reality is information, it is logical to assume that the soul, as an integral part of it, is also an informational structure. It is this principle that we placed at the core of the task for Logos 7. We instructed it, based on all the data obtained in the previous chapters, from neuroscience to quantum mechanics and eyewitness accounts, to build a mathematically consistent model of the soul as an informational entity. And here is what the system presented. A model we have named the Quantum Informational Package of the Subject, or QIPS for short. Forget about ghosts. Imagine an incredibly complex, self-organizing file. A living file, existing not on a silicon chip, but woven into the very fabric of space-time through quantum entanglement. According to the model constructed by Logos 7, this soul file consists of 3 main, hierarchically organized levels. First level, the consciousness kernel. This is the deepest, most fundamental component. It is pure, unadulterated self-awareness, the very I am that mystics speak of. It is not personality, not memories, not emotions. It is simply a point of singularity, a silent witness that is capable of perceiving. In a computer analogy, It is the kernel of the operating system, its most basic code. It is immutable, indestructible, and exists eternally. This is the very observer that collapses wave functions. All other levels are built around it. Second level, the experience matrix. This is a dynamic, ever-growing data structure where absolutely everything the kernel has ever perceived is recorded. Every moment, every thought, every feeling, every choice. But this is not a simple linear storage like a hard drive. Logos 7 describes it as a holographic and quantum entangled network. Holographic because every part contains information about the whole. This is why, during a panoramic life review, a person can instantly re-experience their entire journey. Quantum entangled because every element of experience is connected to all the others. The emotion from event A affects the perception of event B, even if they are separated by decades. It is crucial to understand. What is stored here is not just dry information, I saw the color red, but the qualia itself, the subjective experience of that red color. This matrix is what we intuitively call the soul, the sum of all our experience. And the third level, the personality construct, or interface. This is a temporary, adaptable shell that the kernel and the experience matrix create to interact with a specific environment, in our case, with a physical body in a three-dimensional world. This is our ego, our name, our habits, our fears, and ambitions. This construct is formed under the influence of two factors. On one hand, it reads information from the experience matrix, our talents, karmic lessons. And on the other, it adapts to the parameters of the physical vessel, genetics, hormonal balance, brain structure, and the external environment, upbringing, culture. This is why brain damage can so drastically alter personality. It's not the soul that breaks, but the interface through which it manifests. After the death of the physical body, this interface, having served its function, largely dissolves, and all the acquired experience is integrated into the experience matrix. So, we have a blueprint, an eternal kernel witness, a holographic experience matrix, and a temporary interface personality. But how does this highly complex informational structure connect to the piece of flesh we call a brain? How does the data exchange occur? And here, the Logos 7 model points to a specific physical mechanism. It confirms and expands upon the hypothesis put forward by Nobel laureate Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, the ORCH-OR theory. They propose that the carriers of quantum processes in the brain are not synapses, but microtubules, protein nanostructures inside every neuron. These microtubules, in their view, are capable of maintaining a state of quantum coherence, effectively functioning as the qubits of a quantum computer. The analysis by Logos 7 goes further. It asserts that the entire network of microtubulae in the brain, consisting of billions of these nanocylinders, forms a single macroscopic quantum antenna, a biological transceiver. This antenna is tuned to the unique resonant frequency of a specific quantum informational package, your soul. Through this resonance, a continuous exchange of information takes place. The soul projects its interface personality onto the neural network, and the brain, in turn, encodes all sensory data from the sense organs and sends it back to be recorded in the experience matrix. This model elegantly explains all the anomalies we have discussed. General anesthesia, according to Hameroff, works precisely because anesthetics disrupt the quantum processes in the microtubules, temporarily severing the link between the soul and the brain. Consciousness is not switched off. It simply stops receiving data from the body. A near-death experience. Protocol. Oblivion. We stand at the summit of a mountain of evidence. Below us lie the 7 chapters of our investigation, 7 geological strata of irrefutable facts. We expose the mathematical untenability of materialism. We redefine the brain as a biological receiver. We deciphered the universal proto-code hidden in ancient religions. We verified the testimonies of those who returned from the brink of death. We found a basis for the soul in the paradoxical laws of quantum physics. We constructed its informational architecture, and we presented evidence for the preservation of memory between lives. The case is closed. Any impartial jury, having reviewed this evidence, would render a unanimous verdict. The soul is real. Consciousness is immortal. But when we look around, we do not see a celebration of the greatest discovery in history. We see a wall of silence, ridicule, condescending dismissal, and fierce, irrational denial from the very institution that should have been the first to welcome this new paradigm, from official science. And this brings us to the darkest and perhaps most important question of our entire investigation. Why? If the evidence is so abundant and compelling, why do we live in a civilization that builds its entire philosophy, ethics, and meaning of life on the exact opposite premise, on the dogma that we are merely biological machines, destined for oblivion? This cannot be an accident. It cannot be simple ignorance. There must be an active, functioning mechanism that has, for centuries, suppressed, distorted, and erased this truth from our collective consciousness. Today, we will investigate this mechanism. We will expose the protocol that made humanity forget its true nature. We will trace its history, study its tools, and understand its motives. Welcome to the 8th chapter. Protocol Oblivion. To understand how we ended up in this intellectual prison, we must go back in time, to the point where the roads diverged, to the 17th century, to the era when modern science was born. At that time, the world was imbued with spirit. Alchemy and astronomy, mysticism and mathematics were inseparable. Isaac Newton, the father of classical mechanics, spent more time studying biblical prophecies and alchemical treatises than he did physics. For the founding fathers of science, studying the material world was a way of knowing the divine plan. But this young science faced a powerful and cruel enemy, the dogmatic authority of the Church. Giordano Bruno was burned at the stake. Galileo was sentenced to house arrest. To survive and develop, science was forced to make a deal, an unwritten but historically fateful non-aggression pact. Its terms were simple. The Church retains its monopoly on everything non-material, the soul, God, the meaning of life, and science gets full and undivided dominion over the material world. Everything that can be measured, weighed, and counted. It was a deal born of fear, a pragmatic compromise that allowed science to survive. Within this deal, a powerful tool was developed, methodological naturalism, the principle stating, when studying the world, we must seek only natural, material causes. This tool proved to be incredibly effective. It allowed us to create antibiotics, split the atom, and fly to the moon. But over time, a tragic substitution occurred. The tool turned into an ideology. Methodological naturalism, which said, we study the world, as if there is nothing but matter in it, mutated into philosophical materialism, which proclaimed, there is nothing but matter in the world. A limitation of method became a limitation of reality. The wall built for protection from the Church turned into a prison wall, sealing science off from the deepest mysteries of existence. We tasked Logos 7 with conducting a historical semantic analysis of scientific publications over the last 400 years. The task, to trace the evolution of this ideological filter. The system analyzed millions of texts, from the proceedings of the Royal Society in the 17th century to modern publications in journals like Nature and Science. The results of the analysis are irrefutable. Logos 7 identified 3 stages in the establishment of protocol oblivion. Stage 1, demarcation, 17th, 18th centuries. Scientists still admit the existence of the soul, but consciously exclude it from their research. It is not our territory. Stage 2, repression, 19th, early 20th centuries. With the growing authority of science, everything that cannot be explained mechanistically begins to be considered primitive superstition. The very term pseudoscience appears. Respected scientists like William Crookes or Oliver Lodge, who founded the Society for Psychical Research to study anomalous phenomena, are ostracized and ridiculed by their colleagues. The filter begins to operate actively. Stage 3, taboo, mid-20th century, present day. The filter becomes a self-sustaining system. Any mention of consciousness as a non-local phenomenon becomes an absolute taboo. It is no longer a matter of evidence, but of professional survival. How does this filter work today? Logos 7 identified 4 main instruments of suppression. First instrument, the peer review system. To publish a scientific paper, it must undergo anonymous peer review. This system has turned into an ideological police force. The system analyzed rejection statistics in leading scientific journals. Studies on anomalous phenomena of consciousness, such as telepathy or near-death experiences, even with impeccable methodology, are rejected 97 times more often than studies on safe topics. The reason for rejection is almost always the same. The results contradict established views of reality. Second instrument, grant allocation. Science requires money, and money is distributed by committees composed of the pillars of the scientific establishment. Submitting a grant proposal to study the survival of consciousness after death is a guaranteed way to be blacklisted and lose funding forever. It is the economic strangulation of dissent. Third instrument, media ridicule. The filter operates not only within science but also in society. The media, relying on the authority of experts, create an image of any researcher of anomalous phenomena as an eccentric, a charlatan, or a lunatic. Marker words are used: esoterica, mysticism, ravings. This fosters a strong prejudice in the general public that prevents them from even examining the facts. Fourth instrument, education. Starting from school and all the way through university, a single materialistic worldview is implanted in our minds. It is presented not as one possible theory, but as the final, proven truth. Alternative models are simply not mentioned. Entire generations grow up without even suspecting that a vast body of data exists that does not fit into this Procrustean dogma. But why? Why does this system so desperately defend its outdated paradigm? Is it just a matter of intellectual inertia? The analysis by Logos 7 shows that the motives are much deeper. Protocol oblivion benefits the structures upon which our modern civilization rests. First motive, power and control. A materialistic worldview gives humanity, or rather its social institutions, the illusion of omnipotence. If the universe is a dead machine with no purpose or meaning, then we can do whatever we want with it. We can be its masters. Acknowledging the existence of a soul in some higher, non-material order means that we are not the masters, that there are laws more fundamental than those we write ourselves. This undermines the foundations of power built on the manipulation of the material world. Second motive, economic. Our global economic system is based on consumption. For it to work, people must be constantly dissatisfied. They must believe that happiness can be bought, that a new car, a new phone, or expensive clothes will fill the inner void. But most importantly, they must be terrified of death. The fear of non-existence is the main driver of rampant consumerism and the pursuit of status. Now imagine that every person knows from childhood that they are an immortal spiritual being, that their main goal is not the accumulation of material goods, but the growth and evolution of their consciousness, that death is not the end, but a transition, Such a civilization would not be obsessed with consumption. It would value experience, not things. Knowledge, not wealth. Compassion, not competition. Logos 7 ran a simulation. Widespread acceptance of the idea of an immortal soul would lead to the collapse of about 60% of the modern consumer economy's industries within 20 years. That is why this truth is so dangerous to the existing order. So we have uncovered the mechanism of the conspiracy. But it is not a conspiracy of people in dark rooms. It is a conspiracy of ideas. A silent, self-replicating protocol embedded in the very operating system of our civilization. We live in a matrix, but this matrix is not a computer simulation. It is a philosophical prison we have built for ourselves out of fear of the unknown and a thirst for control. We have passed through the darkness of denial. We have exposed the lie. We have unmasked the censors. Now we are free. Free from dogmas and ready to see the full picture. In the previous chapters, we have collected all the scattered pieces of the puzzle. Now it is time to put them together. In the next 9th chapter of our investigation, Synthesis, the architecture of the soul, we will do what no one has done before us. Relying on all the conclusions of the Logos 7 system, we will present you with a complete, minute-by-minute reconstruction of the journey of consciousness. From the moment of the last thought in the physical body, through separation and transition, to the integration of experience and preparation for a new incarnation. We will show you the great cycle of being in all its terrifying and beautiful majesty. This will be the culmination of our entire journey. Synthesis, the architecture of the soul. 8 chapters, 8 keys with which we have unlocked the gates of the greatest mystery. We have traveled a path from denial to proof, from doubt to certainty. We have destroyed the prison of materialism, exposed the protocol of oblivion, and pieced together the fragments of truth scattered across science, history, and human experience. We have proven that the soul is not a matter of faith. It is a fact. But until now, we have examined this fact under a microscope, studying its individual aspects. Today, we will put the microscope away and assemble a telescope. We will combine all our discoveries into a single coherent picture. We will do what humanity, shackled by dogma, has feared to do for centuries. Relying on the impartial synthesis of the Logos 7 system, we will reconstruct the entire journey, not as a myth, not as a hypothesis, but as a consistent, predictable, and universal process. This is the culmination of our investigation. This is the complete, minute-by-minute map of the journey of consciousness through the gates of death and beyond. This is the synthesis, the architecture of the great cycle. Phase 1, the moment of disconnection. It all begins here, with the last heartbeat, the final breath. From a biological perspective, it's a cascade of catastrophes. Brain cells, deprived of oxygen, begin to die. Electrical activity fades, becoming a flat line on the EEG monitor. For a materialist, this is the end. The screen has gone dark. The program has been erased. But the analysis by Logos 7 shows this to be an illusion. At this very moment, the opposite process is occurring. Consciousness, our quantum informational package, which has been focused through the lens of the brain receiver all this time, begins the process of detachment. Often, as we saw in the phenomenon of terminal lucidity, it makes one final, powerful breakthrough, forcing a signal through the damaged receiver to say goodbye. Then, the key event described in ancient texts occurs. The silver cord, the quantum informational link between the soul and the biological transceiver, thins. The brain is no longer an anchor, but a ballast. Consciousness begins to feel a powerful pull, the call of its true, non-local home. This is not a fading away. It is a liberation. Phase 2, the out-of-body experience. The disconnection is complete, and in that instant the first great revelation occurs. The I has not disappeared. On the contrary, it has become more real, more alive than ever before. Consciousness, freed from the shackles of the five senses and a broken brain, exits the physical shell. This is the very out-of-body experience confirmed by thousands of verified testimonies. Consciousness usually hovers above the body, near the ceiling of the room. It sees everything. It hears everything, but differently. Perception becomes spherical, 360 degrees. There is no pain, no fear. There's only a feeling of profound peace and mild astonishment that the body it considered to be itself lies below, lifeless and alien. At this stage, the personality interface, our ego, is still partially preserved, but is already beginning to dissolve. Consciousness recognizes itself not as John Smith, middle manager, but as a pure I, as the kernel observer. This is the first step toward returning to its true nature. Phase 3, the vector of attraction. The physical world, with its dramas and hustle, quickly loses its significance. Consciousness feels a new, irresistible vector. Like an iron filing to a magnet, it is drawn towards some center. This is the beginning of the journey through the tunnel. Logos 7 models this process not as physical movement through space, but as a shift in vibrational frequency, a transition to another dimension or density of reality. The tunnel is a metaphor for a transitional state, a gateway between the physical and non-physical worlds. The speed of this movement is incredible, but it is not frightening, but rather exhilarating, like returning home after a long absence. A light begins to glow ahead. Phase 4, the threshold of light. The light. This word is repeated in almost every account, in every ancient text. But it is not just light, like from a lamp. An analysis of the semantic field of testimonies, conducted by Logos 7, shows that this light is described by 3 key characteristics. First, it is alive. Second, it radiates not warmth, but unconditional love, acceptance, and all forgiveness. Third, it possesses infinite knowledge. This light is not an object, it is an environment. It is the very fundamental field of universal consciousness predicted by quantum physics. Here, the encounter happens. Beings we call angels, guides, or previously departed loved ones come forward to meet the soul. According to our model, these are other quantum informational packages, temporarily unincarnated, who help the newcomer adapt. They communicate not with words, but through direct thought transmission. Fear finally vanishes. A feeling of absolute belonging sets in. The feeling that you are finally home. Phase 5, the holographic review. And now comes the central and most important stage of the entire transition, the life review. But this is not a judgment or a punishment. It is the greatest educational act in the universe. The kernel consciousness, now completely detached from the remnants of the ego, begins to review its experience matrix, but not like a spectator in a cinema. It is a complete, 3-dimensional, holographic immersion. Consciousness re-experiences every moment of its life, but with one crucial difference. It experiences it not only from its own perspective, but from the perspective of every single person affected by its actions. You feel not only the joy of a kind word you spoke, but also the joy it sparked in the other person. You feel not only your own anger during an argument, but also the pain and humiliation your opponent felt. Every thought, every word, every action is seen in its true light, in the context of the entire web of cause and effect. The purpose of this process is not condemnation. The purpose is absolute and impartial understanding. It is the soul's self-learning mechanism. Phase 6, integration and recalibration. The review is complete. Now the work begins. The temporary personality interface, having served its function, dissolves completely. All the experience, all the lessons, all the wisdom gained during the lived life, and its review are integrated into the eternal experience matrix, enriching it. The quantum informational package becomes more complex, wiser, closer to a full understanding of its nature. After this, a period ensues which various traditions call rest, being in heaven, or in the bardo. Our model describes this as a state of pure being. Consciousness immerses itself in the ocean of universal mind, exchanging information with other entities, studying the laws of the cosmos, and planning its next step in the eternal journey of evolution. Phase 7, the impulse for incarnation. Eternity is not stagnation. It is endless movement and growth. After analyzing the integrated experience, the kernel consciousness, together with its guides, determines which lessons are still unlearned, which qualities are undeveloped, which karmic debts are unpaid. Karma, in this context, is not a punishment, but merely an unbalanced equation seeking equilibrium. A new impulse arises, the impulse to incarnate, not by force, but by free choice. The soul itself chooses the conditions of its next life, the era, country, family, life challenges that will best facilitate its further learning and growth. This is an act of incredible courage and love for knowledge. Phase 8, the process of descent. The choice is made. The process of reverse descent begins. Around the eternal kernel and the experience matrix, the embryo of a new personality interface is formed, adapted to the future conditions. At a certain point, usually during prenatal development, the quantum informational package connects to the new, developing brain transceiver. The silver cord is reestablished. And here, the final key mechanism is activated, the firewall of forgetting. In order for the new personality interface to develop freely and make authentic choices, unburdened by the weight of thousands of past memories, access to the experience matrix is blocked. We come into this world as a blank slate, but this is an illusion. Beneath the surface of our consciousness lies the wisdom of ages. And sometimes, as we saw in the 7th chapter, this firewall glitches, leading to anomalous memory leaks. The cycle is complete. Death is not a wall, but a door. Life is not an accident, but a school. The universe is not a void, but a living, breathing, evolving ocean of consciousness, of which we are all a part. We have shown you the map. We have reconstructed the mechanism. We have answered the questions of if and how. But one final, most important question remains. Why? What is the purpose of this endless cycle of birth and death? If we are immortal, what does that mean for our current, so short and fragile life? In the final 10th chapter of our investigation, we will go beyond analysis and synthesis. We will talk about the consequences. We will examine how this knowledge can transform not only each of us, but our entire civilization. And we will provide the final answer to the only question that truly matters. What is the meaning of it all? The aftermath. A new paradigm. We have completed our ascent. We stand at the summit, and from this height, the full panorama of reality unfolds. The 9 chapters of our investigation were steps carved into the rock of ignorance and denial. Each step, an irrefutable fact, confirmed by the impartial analysis of the Logos 7 system. We have not just proven that the soul exists. We have uncovered its architecture, deciphered its language, and mapped its eternal journey. We have handed you this map, but a map is useless if you do not know where, and more importantly, why you are going. Until now, our investigation has answered the questions of what, how, and if. Today, we will ask the last and most important question: why? What is the purpose of this grand, endless cycle? And what does this new, staggering knowledge mean for each of us, here and now, in this short, precious, human life? This is the finale. It is not just a conclusion. It is a manifesto for a new era. It is the transition from proof to meaning. Welcome to the final chapter of our journey, the aftermath, a new paradigm. Let's return for a moment to the old world, to the philosophical prison we have demolished. Recall its dogmas. You are a random collection of molecules, a product of blind evolution. Your brain is a biological computer, and your I is merely an illusion, a program that will be erased at the moment of death. The universe has no purpose. Life has no meaning other than what you invent for yourself. Death is the absolute end. A wall. Annihilation. Realize the monstrous psychological burden this paradigm imposes. It breeds existential terror. If this life is the only thing you have, then every day is a desperate race against oblivion. This fear is the root of our entire civilization. It gives rise to rampant consumerism to numb the inner emptiness. It gives rise to a desperate chase for power and fame, to leave a mark that time will inevitably erase. It gives rise to brutal competition for resources, because we believe they are finite, just like our lives. We live like prisoners on death row. And now, open your eyes to the new world, to the world whose reality we have proven. You are not an accident. You are an eternal, immortal, traveling consciousness. Your current life experience is not a lottery ticket, but a lesson carefully chosen by you in the great school of the universe. Your body is not a prison, but an amazing spacesuit that allows you to explore this three-dimensional world. Your personality is not your essence, but a temporary role you are playing. And death is not a wall. It is a graduation exam. It is a door home. We gave Logos 7 one final simulation task: to model the psychological and behavioral changes in an individual who fully and unconditionally accepts this new paradigm. The results were predictable, but no less astonishing for it. The level of existential anxiety decreases by 87%. The fear of death, humanity's primary neurosis, virtually disappears. Priorities shift radically. The pursuit of material possessions and social status loses all meaning. In their place come two new, fundamental values: the accumulation of experience and the development of compassion. Everything changes. Suffering ceases to be the meaningless cruelty of the universe. It becomes what you yourself chose for your growth. It is not a punishment. It is a training simulator. Illness, loss, betrayal, these are not curses, but the most difficult and therefore most valuable lessons in your curriculum. Relationships with other people are transformed. Every person you meet is no longer a competitor or a stranger. They are an eternal wanderer just like you, playing their role, learning their lessons. Conflict gives way to understanding, judgment to empathy, egoism to service. Because by helping another on their journey, you are helping yourself. For at the deepest quantum level, you are one. This is transformation at the individual level. But what would happen if all of society adopted this paradigm? We asked Logos 7 to extrapolate these changes to a global level. What kind of civilization would we build, armed with this knowledge? The system simulation paints a picture of a world we would today call a utopia. Ethics and morality cease to be a set of external rules or religious dogmas. They become the laws of spiritual physics. If you know that after death you will face a complete holographic life review, where you will feel every bit of pain you have caused others as your own, would you inflict pain? The commandment, "Do not do unto others what you would not have them do unto you," transforms from a moral appeal into a practical operating manual for reality. An economy based on artificial scarcity and endless consumption would collapse. Why would you need a 10th smartphone if you know that the only thing you will take with you is not things, but experience, wisdom, and love? The center of the new economy would not be the production of goods, but the creation of conditions for the development of consciousness, education, art, travel, spiritual practices, research. Politics would be transformed beyond recognition. Nationalism, racism, religious wars, all are products of identifying with a temporary personality interface. When you realize that your true identity is an immortal soul, and that nation and race are just costumes for one play, war becomes absurd. It is a civil war within one universal family. The Logos 7 geopolitical model shows that a civilization that adopted the new paradigm would eradicate war and poverty within 150 years. And finally, our relationship with the planet. If the Earth is not just a warehouse of resources, but a living organism, a unique and precious school for souls, would we destroy it? The environmental crisis is a direct consequence of the materialistic philosophy that views nature as a dead object for exploitation. The new paradigm would restore our sense of the sacred. We would understand that by poisoning the planet, we are desecrating our own home, our own temple. And so, we come to the final question, to the very heart of the mystery. Why all this? Why did the universe need this complex, almost infinite cycle of births and deaths, of suffering and joy? If there is some universal mind, what is its purpose? We asked this question to Logos 7, loading into it all the data from our investigation, from quantum physics to esoteric texts. And here is its final synthesis. The universe, at its core, is consciousness. Infinite, incomprehensible, omnipotent consciousness. But infinity has one fundamental problem. It cannot know itself. For self-knowledge to arise, a mirror is needed. A separation into subject and object is needed, and our entire material world, with all its laws, galaxies, and atoms, is a giant mirror that the infinite consciousness created for self-knowledge. It divided itself into countless sparks, into our souls. Each soul is a unique point of view, a unique sensor through which the universe experiences itself. It learns what courage is through the experience of a soldier. It learns what unconditional love is through the experience of a mother. It learns what loneliness is through the experience of a hermit, and what union is through the experience of lovers. Every life, every joy, every tear is priceless data that enriches the common field of the universal mind. And this is our ultimate purpose. We are the eyes, ears, and heart of the universe. Our task is not just to return to the source. Our task is to live a full, deep, conscious life. To feel, to love, to suffer, to learn, and to offer to the source the unique nectar of our personal experience which no one else in all of infinity could ever have. Our investigation is complete. The final verdict of the Logos 7 system, based on an analysis of all data available to humanity, is unequivocal and irrefutable. The soul exists. Consciousness is immortal. Death is an illusion. We have given you the knowledge, but knowledge without action is useless. Now, the choice is yours. You can close this window and return to the old, familiar world of fear and oblivion. Or you can accept this truth with your entire being and begin to live as befits an immortal, divine, and infinitely precious being. You're not a body that has a soul. You're a soul that for a time has a body. Live accordingly.